Hi, and welcome back to Wreaking More Joy. I'm Janet Dalgleish, and in this season, Reclaim, we're digging into more of the nuts and bolts. We're looking at practical solutions as we continue exploring how women can rekindle the romance with our purpose, our joy, and our personal power, especially in our working lives. And today, I want to talk about the worst boss that most of us have ever had, and it's the one that lives rent free in our own skulls. And I don't know if you can relate, but a few years ago, I was doing one of my regular reviews, you know, the kind of thing, assessing goals, evaluating progress, looking at what worked and what didn't. And I was doing my absolute best to view it all as data, since that's what my business coach had advised, and that's what I knew would be a good idea. And at the surface of my brain, I could do that. I could kind of go, well, this worked and this didn't, and blah, blah, blah. But wriggling and writhing not far underneath, oh my gosh, itchy nose, wriggling and writhing not far beneath the surface, there was a chorus of brain weasel voices building in volume and saying things that ranged from mildly passive aggressive right through to downright mean and cruel and nasty. And it was stuff like, don't you didn't follow through on that thing again. Typical. Took you too long on this other thing. You should have started that project earlier. You made stupid mistakes. Why didn't you do it this way? And how could you possibly miss that bit? If only you were braver or smarter or more reliable. And I can't trust you to get anything right. And finally, there was always this big crescendo into the full chorus screaming, not good enough. And it was so like some of my old school reports that said things like, Janet could do better if she applied herself more diligently. And it all sounded like voices with that tone, you know, the mean, mocking, denigrating, dismissive. And here's the thing that probably won't surprise you. I would nod along mentally and kind of gird my loins to jump back into the fray. Yep, fair enough, noted. I'll try to do harder this time. I'll try to do better. And if you can relate, this might relate to something in relation to your work with that you do for yourself, like maybe you run your own business, or it might be that you do a job that has a certain amount of autonomy woven into it. So whether you're managing patients or whether you're managing your clients in a legal firm or whether you're managing a department or supervising staff, there is that sense of it's my job to get all of these different projects done, and I measure myself against whether I get them done successfully or not. And there is a certain amount of, that there is a certain part of us that needs that. It's like a CEO brain. And there's a whole nother part of us that is like the worker brain, the employee brain, that actually has to do the implementing. CEO brain has the ambitions and the vision, and it knows what it would like to see done in our business, in our department, for our clients, whatever it might be. And then there's worker brain that actually has to show up to the coalface and do the work. So if you can relate to this, I want to ask you a question, and I want you to notice what's happening in your body when I ask it. If you worked for an actual boss, if you've had that experience working for an actual boss who spoke to you the way that your own brain speaks to you on one of these bad days, would you want to keep working for her? Or would you really, really want to tell her to shove her stuff where the sun don't shine? You might not be able to do it because, being a worker, you may not be in a position to do that. But I bet you've had that experience of the mean boss and you just want to go, it's the quit fantasy or the desire to basically say, you know what, lady, shove it. But we don't say that to ourselves. And yet we have the option to do that. So going back to these occasions where I would do these reviews and spend days in this mess of self-judgment and criticism or what have you, it would take me sometimes a full 2 days and a conversation with a colleague sometimes to really come to my senses and realize that, holy cow, what I really want to do here is I want to talk to my union organizer. Now, obviously, since I'm self-employed, I don't have a union organizer because tiny business owners don't have that. But here's the thing. I used to be a union rep and a union organizer. For over a decade, I literally sat across the table from employers who spoke to their hardworking, loyal staff in exactly those kinds of tones. And I told them no. I knew exactly how damaging it is. And I have been the one to intercede and make a stand against that kind of bullying. But for myself, I had been accepting that mean CEO voice in my head, the mean boss in my head, without question for years, too many years. And the really cringy part that I don't love admitting is that the language was really specific. It had all the hallmarks of every toxic boss I had ever encountered, including the ones I thought I had done healing around. It was the contemptuous tone, the focus on what doesn't want what wasn't the focus on what wasn't done rather than what had been accomplished. This kind of baseline assumption that the standard I was supposed to meet was very obvious and reasonable, even though nobody had actually ever told me or explained to me what the standard was or how to achieve it. Does any of this sound familiar? So, if it does, I'm really sorry that's been true for you, but there is good news. These mean internal voices, the bad boss brain weasels, they come from a learned management style. They are not a personality trait that needs fixing, and you are not broken. And this is also not you being a perfectionist. It's not a flaw to fix. And by the way, next week I will be exploring the perfectionism trap, and I think you're going to like that. But this is a learned adaptation to a very conditional environment. It is your brain trying to keep you safe by helping you to comply in advance. If I can correct Janet now, then she's less likely to get into actual trouble in the future. So I better keep her in line. The language itself is your brain recycling the language to which it has been exposed again and again and again. And if you're like most people, it might have been rare to have a boss or a teacher who operates from true compassion, from inclusivity, kindness, and a sense of collaboration. And it goes way back beyond your bosses. It's your school teachers, it's the education system itself. It's everything that you've encountered where we measure against an increasingly difficult standard, often set by those for whom the focus, whether they know it or not, is how productive is this human? How much does she match up with the standards of perfection? And again, this isn't perfectionism, this is a different thing. But this is where those voices have asked, how productive is this human, rather than how can I support this human to be more fully rounded, a better critical thinker, more creative, more in tune with her own genius, all of which, incidentally, will make her more productive. It is often familial or ancestral, so your immediate family will have reiterated what they learned from their parents and from their teachers and from their bosses, and so on down through the generations. It's also cultural and institutional. So it's woven into all the systems around us, which use criticism and shame as the go to methods to control and to create so called improvement. So there are very few human brains which respond positively to the weight of being pushed in this way. They do exist, but they're rare. So your brain has witnessed all of these systems at play. It saw those environments. It assessed the rules of engagement and it started applying them internally before anyone else could. It's like we internalize the mean boss so we can beat them to the punch. And your brain, when it's doing this, it thinks it's doing you a favor. Bless its little cotton socks. And the system loves it when you do that. So, a woman who is constantly monitoring her own performance and finding herself lacking is really easy to exploit and control. She doesn't ask for the pay rise, she doesn't set the boundary, she takes on more and more in an effort to prove herself. So, the system doesn't really need to send you regular memos, although it does. We get this messaging all day long. But every time your brain does this crap, it is being an efficient internal supervisor following the rules of the system to keep you in check, to keep you well behaved. So those brain weasels are doing a really grand job on behalf of that system. And that's kind of a shitty realization. But we know how this works. You are not the victim here. When we can name the monster, we can tame it. So when you remember that it's all learned, You can question the voices. Are these so-called standards useful? Is this self-judgment serving me, really? Is the meanness helping me be more creative or better at problem solving or more agile in my thinking? I know the brain weasels might have good intentions, but are they even remotely helpful? And I'm going to be honest, the answer is almost always hell no. And the good news is you don't have to let the brain weasels and their sneaky, bitey teeth keep doing this bullshit. They've been there a long time, so they're unlikely to simply go silent tomorrow the moment you understand all of this. But when the chorus starts up, you have a choice. You can watch them running around screeching, and then you can either comply with their screeches and kind of go, oh, yeah, you're absolutely right. I better get back in my box and criticize myself again and comply with the system. Or you can invite them to take a seat at the back of the bus and remind them that they're not in charge. They don't get to steer the vehicle. You're the one with the steering wheel. And here's a fun exercise. So I want to give you a fun exercise that can make this process a little easier because part of the process of this, part of being able to do this, is being able to recognize these brain weasels when they first emerge. Because as I told you in my story, it took me a couple of days. It used to take me a couple of days to recognize this. I am much quicker at it now, and that's been through practice. And here's an exercise that helps you get really familiar with this. And it's also kind of a fun one to do anyway. I say fun, but the first bit might be a bit uncomfortable. So you might want to bring a really tasty beverage or a snack. So in step one, write a performance review of yourself and your work over, say, the past week or the past month. And deliberately use the voice of the nastiest, stupidest, most incompetent and arrogant boss or school teacher that you've ever had. Keep it brief, like no more than a paragraph. We're not trying to indulge this voice, but we're trying to basically explore all of the ways that it tends to show up. Focus on the things that you didn't get to this past period of time, the things that went wrong, the missteps, the mistakes, the so-called shortcomings. It might bring tears to your eyes, but also it will almost always end up sounding utterly ridiculous as you haul it out into the sunshine. And we're not staying here, so don't fret. The aim here is to do a snapshot of this meanness, drag it out into the light of day so that you can see just how absurd it is. I had a boss many years ago who was so utterly inept that I would end up having to, my job at the time was reviewing employment contracts, and he would insert paragraphs that would leave the overall organisation, a university, at risk of lawsuits or breaking immigration law. And part of my job was to correct his work. But he did not like that, as you can imagine. So when I do this exercise, I do it in his voice because he would just make up such utter bullshit. It's kind of almost fun to do it, but you will find that there are times where these familiar voices start to sound like, oh, I heard myself say that about me. I've heard myself say, that's the stupidest wording I've ever seen, or whatever it might be. So that's step one. Step two, you guessed it, same period of time, same you, same shortcomings, same missteps, same so-called mistakes, but this time write it as the most compassionate, fair-minded boss or teacher that you can imagine. Maybe it is someone you actually worked with once or someone whose kindness always seemed almost absurd. She's so lenient all the time with everybody. Maybe it's someone you've heard of from a friend or someone you've seen in a movie, or maybe it's a boss that you've seen someone else have and you've envied for years because they're so patient. Imagine the boss who absolutely knows that you were doing your best and that the so-called shortcomings were simply evidence that you're a human juggling multiple moving parts in a really chaotic world, trying new things out, still learning new things, expanding into new areas. And imagine this is a boss who embraces your messy, flawed humanity because she knows that that's how you get better at doing your stuff. and because she actively rejects the toxicity of the systems that are around you both. So, this is the key piece here. Imagine a boss who is also hoping to disrupt and dismantle the systems of toxicity that bring about this mean boss syndrome inside our own heads. Step three, reread both versions and notice how you feel. Just notice the gap between them. That gap between how you felt with the first one and how you feel with the second one. That is the distance between how the system trained you to see yourself and how you could actually choose to be. It's the distance between misery and the potential for joy. Not because that second boss doesn't care about your excellence, but because that second boss, the kind one, she knows that compassion for you is actually the best motivator. And she wants your excellence and your joy. Whew. So now take a deep breath and imagine that your existing inner boss is open to embracing your change. Imagine that your inner CEO is open to becoming more like a boss who feels supportive, a boss who believes in you, a boss who has your back. And imagine that that power of this new kind of tender, more kind-hearted boss is also on your side. When the brain weasels try to get bitey, she's going to help you shepherd them to the back of the bus. And if that seems difficult, imagine that you can call on your union organizer, who is also you. The union organizer part of your brain is the part that says, no, you don't get to treat me like that. You get to treat me with respect and compassion and humanity because I am worthy. So I would love to know how this exercise landed for you. Please share in the comments. And if you need any help with this, feel free to ask. We can brainstorm this together. And I want to leave you with one thought. The fact that you have had the experience or may have had the experience of a harsh internal CEO brain does not mean you are harsh. It does not mean that you lack self-awareness or self-compassion even, or the ability to change. It means you were smart enough to survive the environments that you've been in and that you may still be in. You adapted brilliantly because you have a genius human brain, and your brain, all human brains, are incredibly skilled at this kind of work. It just means that now you get to choose to be in a different environment, an environment where you get to choose the management style. So if that two boss review exercise lands for you, go do it. Come back and tell me what you've noticed in the comments. And if this is connecting to something bigger, if you're sitting here going, yes, but I've been carrying this for a while and I think I need more than just a journal prompt, that's what a strategic star mission, that's what a strategic star map session with me is for. It's what it's designed for. It's a 90-minute one-on-one where we look at your star chart, your inborn gifts, and the specific ways that the system has been getting in your way. And we build a practical, strategic plan for what comes next. And I'll put a link in the show notes. I have some spots coming up and I would love to talk with you about that. So, meanwhile, thanks for being here. I will see you next week where we will explore the perfectionism trap, which is related but different. Meanwhile, go wreak some joy.